My name is Jessica Miller. I'm 71 years old, and I've lived my whole life in a small, quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. It's the kind of place where winters are cold, but the streets feel warmer when family is close, or at least they used to. Christmas has always been the time I wait for, even more than my own birthday. When the air turns crisp and the evenings start smelling faintly of wood smoke, I can feel that old, familiar warmth in my chest. It's not about the gifts or the food, it's the faces around the table, the laughter that fills the gaps in conversation. It wasn't always just me in this house. Years ago, when my husband Robert was alive, December was a month of busy hands and full hearts. We'd string up the lights together, untangling the same knotted mess we swore we'd fixed the year before. The sound of him humming carols under his breath as he worked is still tucked somewhere in my memory, like a song you don't want to fade. After Robert passed, the holidays changed. The rooms felt larger, the nights longer. That first Christmas without him, I kept the decorations in their box. I couldn't bring myself to put them up, not without his hands beside mine. But as the years went by, I realized that letting the season slip away made the loneliness worse. So I started small again. A wreath on the door, a few candles in the windows, the old tree in the corner with ornaments we'd collected over decades. My son, David, would visit with his wife Claire, and later, the children. Their voices would fill the house in a way that almost felt like the old days. I'd watch the little ones race down the hallway, their socks sliding on the wood floors, their laughter bouncing off the walls. Those moments stitched together the empty spaces Robert had left behind. Each year, I'd tell myself to hold on to those visits, to keep making Christmas something they'd want to come home for. I baked the cookies they loved, hang stockings with their names, and plan the dinner menu weeks in advance. It gave me something to look forward to when the days grew short and quiet. Maybe that's why I never questioned their promises. When they said they'd be here, I believed them without a second thought. In my mind, Christmas wasn't just a date. It was a promise we all silently agreed to keep. This year, as December rolled in, I felt that familiar sense of anticipation again. The house was ready. My heart was ready. All that was left was to wait for the sound of their car in the driveway. It was early in December when David called. I remember I was in the kitchen, peeling apples for a pie. The window above the sink was fogged from the steam, and outside, the yard was covered in a thin frost. "Mom," he said, his voice easy and warm, "we'll be with you for Christmas this year." All of us. I could almost picture them. The kids bundled in their coats, Claire carrying a tray of something she'd baked, David shaking the snow from his boots. That image stayed with me long after we hung up. I asked if they were sure, knowing how busy their lives could get. David chuckled softly. "Of course we're sure. We wouldn't miss it." It's strange how a few simple words can fill up a whole week. I found myself humming as I folded laundry, setting aside the heavier blankets for their beds. At the store, I reached for the hot cocoa mix the children liked, even though it wasn't on my list. When I called my friend Martha later that evening, I told her I wouldn't be alone this year. I think she could hear the smile in my voice. In the quiet moments before bed, I thought of Robert. If he were here, he'd be just as excited. I could almost see him moving through the house, planning where we'd put the extra chairs. Knowing they'd be here made the dark, cold nights seem shorter. I counted the days, not out of impatience, but with the steady comfort of someone who believes in promises. The first weekend of December, I pulled the old boxes from the attic. The cardboard was soft in places, edges frayed from years of being taped and untaped. When I opened the top, the faint scent of pine and dust drifted up, and for a moment, it felt like Robert was just in the next room. I started with the tree. The stand creaked a little as I tightened the screws, making sure it wouldn't lean. The branches smelled faintly of the artificial pine I'd had for years, but when the lights went on, the room seemed warmer. I hung the ornaments slowly, each one carrying its own small story. The glass snowman David made in third grade, the wooden reindeer Robert bought at a roadside market one winter, the gold star with its bent tip, still sturdy enough to sit at the top. In the kitchen, I laid out my baking plans like a small holiday blueprint. Sugar cookies with red and green sprinkles for the kids. Pecan pie for Claire. She'd once told me mine tasted better than any she'd had. and for David, the same gingerbread cake his father used to love. The smell of cinnamon and cloves filled the air as I measured the spices, warming the house in a way no heater could. I even set the table a week early just to see how it would look. White tablecloth, the good dishes I only use for holidays, silverware polished until it caught the light. I placed the napkins in gentle folds, imagining little hands reaching for the bread basket, laughter spilling over from one end of the table to the other. As I stepped back, I could almost hear it. The clink of glasses, the shuffle of chairs, the rhythm of voices blending into something that felt like home. And with each small touch, I thought, this year will be different. This year we'll all be together. Christmas morning came cold and still, the kind of quiet where even the street outside seemed to be holding its breath. I woke before the sun, pulled on my robe, and started the coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, mixing with the faint sweetness from the pie I'd baked the night before. I set out the cups and saucers, placing the sugar bowl in the middle of the table. The tree lights were still on from the night before, casting soft colors across the room. I kept glancing toward the window, listening for the crunch of tires on the driveway. 8 o'clock came, then 9. I told myself they might be taking their time, letting the kids sleep in after the long drive. By 10, the coffee had cooled, and I reheated it just in case. When my phone finally lit up, my chest lifted, thinking it was a text to say they were on their way. But it wasn't a message, it was a photo notification. I opened it without thinking. There they were, all four of them, bundled in thick jackets and knit hats, smiling against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. Claire's arm was around David's waist. The kids were holding ski poles, cheeks pink from the cold. The caption read, "First day on the slopes." I stared at the screen, the hum of the fridge suddenly loud in the silence. My coffee sat untouched. I didn't feel anger at first, just a slow, sinking weight in my chest. I set the phone down, the sound of it on the counter sharper than I meant. Outside, the frost was beginning to melt, drops of water sliding down the glass. I watched them fall, one after another, and thought about how the day I had pictured was never going to happen. I sat at the kitchen table for a long while, the phone face down beside me. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking a morning that no longer belonged to me. The pie on the counter was still covered, untouched, the cinnamon scent now faint in the cool air. I thought about calling David, just to ask, just to hear why. But the words felt heavy before they even left my mind. I didn't want to sound hurt, though I was. I didn't want to sound needy, though maybe I was. Instead, I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into my fingers. Outside, the bare branches swayed in the wind, their shadows shifting across the wall. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children's laughter, not theirs, but close enough to make my chest tighten. I tried to picture them skiing, their smiles, their flushed cheeks, the way the cold air must have stung their faces. It wasn't hard to imagine, but it was hard to accept, especially knowing they had promised me something else entirely. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that made every small sound sharp. The creak of the chair when I shifted, the faint buzz of the refrigerator, the slow drip of water in the sink. I had prepared for noise, for warmth, for company. Now I had only space, and time that seemed to move slower with every passing minute. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the weight of it settle in. And in that stillness, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I turned the phone over, the screen still glowing faintly, and then pressed the side button until it went black. The quiet that followed felt heavier, as if the air in the room had thickened. I slid it into the drawer beside the sink and closed it gently. No vibration, no new photos, no explanations, just stillness. For a moment, I leaned on the counter, my hands flat against the cool surface. I thought about how many times I'd been the one to call, to bridge the distance, to pretend I didn't notice when they forgot something important. Each time, I told myself it didn't matter as long as they showed up eventually. But sitting there that morning, I realized showing up wasn't something you should have to earn from your own family. It should just happen, like the sun rising. The house smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon, but it was an empty kind of warm, the kind that didn't reach the heart. I picked up my mug, took one slow sip, and let the quiet fill the space where my waiting used to be. I wasn't going to ask them why. I wasn't going to remind them of the promise. I was done trying to make my place where it wasn't freely given. In the days that followed, I moved through the house quietly. I put away the extra blankets I'd set out for them, folded the tablecloth, and returned the good dishes to the cabinet. The ornaments stayed on the tree, but I stopped turning on the lights at night. I didn't call. I did it right when David sent a short text 2 days later. Hope you had a nice Christmas, Mom. I read it once, set the phone down, and let it sit unanswered. There had been so many times I'd stepped in when they needed something. Watching the kids on short notice, sending money when a bill caught them off guard, driving across town to drop off dinner when Claire was sick. I'd done it gladly without keeping score. But now, I found myself quietly stepping back. When David hinted about needing help with the kids in January, I told him I had plans. When Claire mentioned a fundraiser at the school, I wished her luck and didn't offer to contribute. Not out of spite, but because I felt something inside me shift. In the evenings, I sat with my tea and looked through travel magazines I'd picked up at the library. Warm places with open skies, cities with markets and music in the streets. I circled a few pages without saying a word to anyone. I wasn't sure where I'd go yet, but I knew one thing. Next Christmas, I wouldn't be here, waiting for a promise that might never come. By February, they had started to notice. David called one Saturday morning, his voice carrying that careful tone people use when they're not sure what they've done wrong. He asked if I could watch the kids for the weekend. I told him I had a full schedule and couldn't rearrange it. I didn't explain further. A week later, Claire sent me a photo of the children holding drawings they'd made. I wrote back, "They're growing so fast," and left it at that. No long conversation. No offer to visit. There was a time when I would have jumped at the chance to be with them, clearing my days without a second thought. But now I found myself guarding my time the way I used to guard my savings, giving it only where it felt truly wanted. When they brought up Easter dinner, I said I'd already been invited elsewhere. That wasn't a lie. Martha had asked me to join her family weeks earlier, and I'd said yes without hesitation. It felt good to accept an invitation where I didn't have to wonder if I was an afterthought. Their confusion showed in the small pauses, the quiet "oh" before they changed the subject. I let those moments pass without filling them. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about learning how to live without waiting for their approval. And the more I kept my distance, the lighter I began to feel. By the time Christmas came around again, the air outside carried that crisp, pine-scented cold I've always loved. But instead of waiting for the phone to ring or checking the mailbox for a card, I was packing a small suitcase. My friends and I had planned a week-long trip to Santa Fe, something I'd never done during the holidays. The morning of our departure, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the steam curl upward. The house felt different this year. Not empty, just quiet in a way that didn't ache anymore. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts without them turning bitter. On the train, I watched snow dust the edges of the tracks, the fields stretching white and endless. My friends chatted beside me, their laughter warm and easy. I found myself smiling without forcing it. There was no part of me wondering what David and Claire were doing, no urge to check my phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I was exactly where I wanted to be. That's when I realized I'd stopped waiting for an invitation that might never come. And somehow, that felt like the best gift I could have given myself. Sometimes, letting go isn't about walking away in anger. It's about choosing peace over longing. I didn't think I'd ever find comfort in that quiet, but I did, and it's made me stronger in ways I didn't expect. Have you ever had to stop waiting for someone to care? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more daily emotional stories.